I'm going to try to read tonight without my glasses. Okay, so bear with me. All right. But we have Leviticus chapter 9, verse 1 through 11:47. 2 Samuel 6, 1 through 7:17, and Mark chapter 9, 1 through 13. Those are the portions for this teaching. And we're going to be studying Torah out of the 11th chapter of Leviticus. I want to do a very basic but to the point teaching, because there are those who are coming into the faith that just cannot seem to grasp the clean food laws. And so we're going to address this in a simple but as in depth as we can. A lot of people get confused with some of the things that were written in the New Testament, or the Brit Ha Dasha. So we're going to go there and explain some of the verses that preachers that don't understand the concept or precepts or teachings of Torah, they are misleading people by using certain scriptures to do what they say proves that the food laws were done away with. Okay, which is just not true. All right, so we're going to go over that. Also, we're going to have a word study on Brad's board. Hallelujah. And so let's get right into it. Let's pray, say the Shema, and ask Yahweh for his presence during this study. Oh, Father, great King, Yahweh, we come before you and we invite you, Father, to be present with us as we study your word. Let your Spirit be there with us, Father. Lead us and guide us. Show us the deep meanings of your word and help us to make the connections from your Torah to what is written in the New Testament, Father. Help us to understand so that we can worship you in truth, for we know this is your will. We thank you so much for your kindness and your grace, your faithfulness, for being our Elohim, in whom we can trust. You're always there. We thank you for your Son and the blood that he shed. Thank you, Yeshua. And we give you blessings. We baruch you, Abba. And we thank you so much, Father. Open our ears and bless us with wisdom and understanding that comes from you and you alone. And we pray and ask this in the name of Yeshua, our Messiah. Hallelujah. Amen. Shema Israel, Yahweh Eloheinu, Yahweh Echad, Baruch Shem Kavod, Malkuto Leolam Bayed. Hear, O Israel, Yahweh our Elohim, Yahweh is one, and blessed be his esteemed name forever. Hallelujah. Amen. So, as I was saying, everybody get your scriptures open and get a pencil and paper. We will be doing a Greek word study this evening to help, because we're going to go over a set of verses that I've went over not too long ago in one of the teachings. I can't remember which one it was. It might have been the Roman series. So whenever I notice that I'm going over a set of scriptures that I've gone over in the recent past, what I like to do is try to dig a little bit deeper and bring something else out of the scriptures to study, to bring different understanding from those verses. Once again, there are 4 levels of study to every verse, okay, according to Hebrew study. And so we want to take it a little bit deeper, and that, of course, will be a point to be made, is to show the in-depth meanings in the Brit Ha Dasha concerning what was written and spoken, written by the hand of Moshe and spoken by the mouth of Yahweh himself in the law and the prophets. Amen. So everybody get your pencil and paper. We're going to be reading out of Leviticus chapter 11, verses 1 through 11, and then we'll probably take a look at verses 44 through 47 as well. Hallelujah. All right. Leviticus 11, beginning at verse 1. And Yahweh spoke to Moshe and to Aaron, saying unto them, Speak to the children of Israel, saying, These are the living creatures which you do eat among the beasts that are on the earth. So Yahweh is fixing to describe what is food, that which is to be consumed, and that which is not to be consumed. On the earth. Every creeping creature. Okay? So this is where he's separating the clean from the unclean, which is something that is also written in the Brit Ha Dasha or New Testament. Okay? So whenever we see teachings in the New Testament that tell us to come, like, for instance, to come out from among them and be ye separate, written in Corinthians, what does that actually mean? The definition of that, what we're supposed to come out from, which is something I've done a teaching on not long ago, and apparently so has Brother Lou White recently, on syncretism. Come out of this mixture of religions and follow the doctrine that is written in the Torah. Okay? That's where all the definitions of sin, unrighteousness, righteousness, holiness, set apartness are all defined there. Okay, so we are looking for biblical definitions to these things, clean and unclean. We're going to go over that this evening. Now, anytime you come across something in the New Testament that says that you will make a difference between clean and unclean, then the proper way to study that would be to get your Strong's Concordance and look up the word clean and unclean and look it up throughout your scriptures where it's used. And that will be the definition of clean and unclean that those men were speaking of, because once again, there was no New Testament in the days that they wrote those letters that we now see in what we know as the Brit Ha Dasha or New Testament. Okay, they only had the law and the prophets, and I can't stress that enough. They only had the law and the prophets to teach from. Amen? So, this is where we're going to see Yahweh define by his own word, okay? That as a matter of fact, anytime you see one of the prophets say, and the word of Elohim or the word of Yahweh came unto me, okay? And anytime you see one of the apostles or emissaries or disciples, whoever wrote whatever you're reading, bring up the word that was spoken, it is talking about what was spoken in the law and the prophets, always pertaining to what had already been written. Hallelujah. Verse 3, whatever has a split hoof, completely divided, chewing the cud, among the beasts, that you do eat. So, let's clarify, chewing the cud usually means, and I went over this not long ago, but to those of you that haven't seen or do not know what that means, normally, it means certain animals had more than one digestive tract. And this animal, whatever it ate, usually a grazing animal, not carnivorous, would regurgitate and swallow again. And this was a process which is called chewing the cud. And it has more than one stomach. See, an animal that chews the cud has a cleaner digestive system, and therefore their meat is clean. All right? So the animals that Yahweh says is meat that can be consumed, or what we would now call food, okay, must both have a split hoof and chew the cud. Only these you do not eat, among those that chew the cud or those that have a split hoof. The camel, I went over this not too long ago. I believe it was in the Roman series. The camel is a means of transportation. Okay, it's not food. Because it chews the cud but does not have a split hoof. See, it must have both. It is unclean to you. Now, if it's unclean to us, it's because it's unclean to Yahweh. You see. Verse 5. And the rabbit, because it chews the cud but does not have a split hoof, it is unclean to you. That's a pet. Not food. The hare, which is related to the rabbit, because it chews the cud but does not have a split hoof, it is unclean to you. Here's everybody's weakness. And the pig, the swine. Though it has a split hoof completely divided, yet does not chew the cud, it is unclean to you. Their flesh you do not eat, and their carcass you do not touch. They are unclean to you. So, these things that Yahweh just said were unclean have never been considered food by anybody that knew the Mighty One of Israel, okay, and His Word that is found in the Law and the Prophets. The pig or swine was never, ever considered food by the people of Yahweh. And we're going to see tonight biblical testimony showing that not even after Yeshua, after his death, burial, and resurrection, was any of them eating these unclean things. They remained unclean. We're going to see that. And these specific verses that we go over, men in churchanity are teaching you that that's not actually the case, that it's okay to eat them now, but it's because of their failure to teach the whole chapter of the verses that they're teaching from. They want to pull out certain verses. We're going to leave them in context tonight, and we're going to study it out. We're going to show you and reveal these men's evils. And I pray to anybody out there that might be a pastor or preacher, teacher, priest, whatever, okay, that if you watch this teaching and seriously, if you really love the Mighty One of Israel, who sent the Redeemer to us, who delivered us, who sent the one who died on the stake for us, if you truly love Him, okay, honestly look inside yourself and ask yourself, have I been teaching that correctly? Does this man that I'm watching have a point? Okay, because my point is that the Word of Yahweh will never change. And if our theology in the New Testament changes what was already written, I must question the teachings and the person that is teaching it, rather than to question the Word of Yahweh Himself. You see, most seminary schools and theology courses and men's interpretation of with New Testament theology contradicts that which was spoken by the Creator of all living things. We can't have that. We need to pull ourselves in line with His Word. The New Testament should make sense and line up with the written Word, that which already was. The book of Romans says that we should follow the things that were written aforetime because they were written for our learning. And that's what Torah means, the first 5 books. It means instructions, written for our instruction, our learning. Okay. Let's go back to verse 8. Their flesh you do not eat, and their carcasses you do not touch. They are unclean to you. These you do eat of all that are in the waters. Anyone that has fins and scales in the waters, in the seas, in the rivers, that you do eat. So, whatever we eat that is a fish must have both fin and scale. Now, I've heard somebody question me not too long ago and ask if tuna, because tuna does have scales. It's just so fine that it looks like a skin. Tuna is fine. Shrimp, catfish, lobster, crabs, clams, all of those things are unclean. We're also going to see by Yahweh's own word that these things are not only unclean, they are abominations. Verse 10, but all that have not fin and scales in the seas and in the rivers, all that move in the waters, or any living creature which is in the waters, they are an abomination unto you. Verse 11, they are an abomination to you. Of their flesh you do not eat, and their carcasses you abominate. Okay? So, having read these portions in the Torah, I want to now go into a biblical study about that which was written and some of the theology that we have received from people using certain verses in the Brit Ha Dasha, and the way they teach it contradicts the word of Yahweh himself. This is what we must look for. Anyone who contradicts the word of the author of this book by way of their theology or what they've been taught in theology, okay? We must beware of such teachings. There's only one being that ever defied the word of Yahweh, and he, she, or it, Satan, was cast out of the kingdom, heavenly kingdom for that, and took a third of the heavenly beings with her on her way out. Okay? Same thing happened when Eve was deceived. Had Eve, and then inadvertently Adam, okay, doubting the word of Yahweh Elohim. If your theology in the church, in Bible correspondence courses, in Bible colleges, in seminary schools, contradicts the word that was spoken by Yahweh himself, you should not have to question just knowing those two things alone. Okay? It is iniquity to not accept the word of Elohim, nor his commandments. It is iniquity. Yeshua had some things to say about those people who were found in iniquity. Depart from me, you workers of iniquity. Okay, iniquity was found in Hasatan, and iniquity is now found in the creation rampant. Doubting the word that existed thousands of years prior to any type of New Testament theology. We must not doubt this word. So, having said that, we're going to go to a few sets of scripture in the New Testament that people love to use to contradict that which was written by Moshe here and spoken directly from the mouth of Elohim. Okay? Now, before we go there, let us read verses 44 through 47. For I am Yahweh your Elohim, and you shall set yourselves apart. You shall make yourselves holy. You see this? And you shall be set apart. You must be holy. For I am set apart. Remember, Peter said the same thing, Kepha. Okay? This is where he gets these biblical standards, okay, from adhering to Yahweh's spoken word and written word. Hallelujah. And do not defile yourselves with any creeping creature that creeps on the earth. You, me, and everybody else that has, or anyone who chooses to follow the teachings of any man in any church, I don't care where it is, what kind of degree they hold, if they tell you that you are clean, a clean vessel, if you've eaten these things that were described as an abomination to Yahweh, Yahweh doesn't change, man's theology did, okay, then I would have to question whether you're actually clean before Yahweh and set apart. You see my point? And you shall be set apart, for I am set apart. This is the Torah of the beast, the law. Okay? That which Yahweh has decreed is law. Rules. Right ruling for his kingdom and those who live in it. Okay? This is the Torah of the beasts and the birds and every living creature that moves in the waters and every creature that creeps on the earth. Okay? To make a distinction between the unclean and the clean, and between the living creature that is eaten and the living creature that is not eaten. You see this? So there are creatures that are clean and are to be eaten, and there are creatures that are unclean and shall not be eaten. That means they were never considered food or meat, ever. And the people who wrote the scriptures spoke and wrote Hebrew and Aramaic. Okay? They worshipped the mighty one of Israel. They knew exactly what clean. As a matter of fact, before we go on, before I forget, I believe it's 1 Corinthians 6. No, 2 Corinthians. Yes. Go to 2 Corinthians chapter 6. Now remember, Yahweh just told Moshe and Aaron that he was to tell the children of Israel, that means those who rule with El, Yisrael, okay, that they must make the distinction between clean and unclean. Now, here we see Shaul writing this way after Yeshua and his death, burial, and resurrection. All right? Let's look at verses 14 through 17. Do not become unevenly yoked with unbelievers, for what partnership have righteousness and lawlessness? It's talking about the things that were written in the law. And what did we just read right here in verse 46 in Leviticus? This is the law of the beast. Hallelujah. Teaching the same principles. For what partnership have righteousness and lawlessness? And what fellowship has light with darkness? And what agreement has Messiah with Belial? Or what part does a believer have with an unbeliever? And what union has the dwelling place of Elohim with idols? We're talking, he's saying here, you cannot have syncretic beliefs. Okay? You cannot worship Yahweh and not follow his written word. That is syncretic. You're listening to people who came out of paganism tell you that, and now our theology is based on those people, the Greek and Latin church, opposed to that which was spoken in the synagogues in the first century even. That which was written in the Torah, ultimately. Okay? For you are a dwelling place of the living Elohim, as Elohim has said, I shall dwell in them and walk among them, and I shall be their Elohim, and they shall be my people. Listen to verse 17. Therefore, come out from among them, and be ye separate, saith Yahweh. And do not touch what is unclean, and I shall receive you. Back to Leviticus chapter 11 and at verse 47. To make a distinction between the unclean and the clean, and between the living creature that is eaten and the living creature that is not eaten. That which is food and that which is not food. Okay? Hallelujah. So now let's go into the Brit Ha Dasha and take a look at a few sets of scriptures that people love to use to try to explain away these commanded food laws. Okay? Let's go to 1 Timothy chapter 4. Now, most teachers that don't believe that we have to follow these food laws any longer, they love to read verses 1 through 4 here. We're going to take it a little bit further. This is also where we're going to do the Greek word study on Brad's board. Hallelujah. 1 Timothy chapter 4, beginning at verse 1. But the Spirit distinctly says, now who was speaking back here to Moshe and Aaron? Yahweh, by way of his Spirit. Yahweh spoke it then, and this is what Shaul is saying now. The Spirit of Yahweh says this. But the Spirit distinctly says that in the latter times some shall fall away from the belief. What belief? That which was taught in the law and the prophets. There was no New Testament theology at that point. First century, no such thing as a New Testament. Okay? So they would fall away from the belief that was being taught out of the law and the prophets. Paying attention to misleading spirits. People who would lead you away from the truth that was written in the Torah. Having you doubting and not believing and not having faith in that which was spoken from the mouth of the Creator, Yahweh, through Moshe and the prophets. Paying attention to misleading spirits and teachings, and most of you are going to see doctrines of demons. So any doctrine that contradicts that which was written in the true faith that these men spoke of, okay, is considered by them and by myself to be the doctrine of the devil, of a demon. Why? Because it contradicts the word of Yahweh himself. Does this not seem to put a little bit more importance on that which was written in the book of Leviticus concerning these things that are food or which are not food? Let's keep this in perspective, okay? Because these things, when you pay attention to such teachings, they are misleading. Okay, and it says that they are teachings of a demon. Verse 2, speaking lies. Anything that contradicts the spoken word of Yahweh through Moshe and the prophets, okay, is a lie. If it contradicts anything that was ever written or spoken by the mouth of Yahweh himself, okay, it is a lie. Speaking lies and hypocrisy, having branded their own conscience, forbidding to marry. You know, we see the Pope telling his priests that they can't marry, saying to abstain from foods. Okay, a lot of you are going to see meats there, right? This is where we're going to do our word study. We're going to read through first, and I'll make some points, and we'll go back. Which Elohim created to be received with thanksgiving by those who believe and know the truth. The truth is already defined about that which is food and is not food in the Torah. We just read it. There are things that were created. Everything that was created in the beginning was good. However, when sin came into the world, certain things became unclean in order to keep the earth clean for us. Nothing is unclean in and of itself. In other words, that scripture is telling us that nothing was created unclean. But when sin entered the world and death came, certain things had to be sacrificed as being unclean in order to, like, let's take the swine, for instance, and the bottom-dwelling fish. They became unclean because they had to eat the things, dead carcasses, things like that. They had to be made unclean. They were sacrificed in order to keep the earth cleansed for us. Nothing is unclean in and of itself, but things became unclean when sin entered the world, you see, because death came. A pig will eat a dead body, bone and all, nothing left. And you cannot breed that stuff out of a swine. There is no such thing as a domestic swine according to Scripture. Swine will always be unclean no matter where you get it. It is not food according to Scripture. Now remember, there's a certain time of the year when the Catholic people are told to abstain from certain meats or foods. Yahweh, what this verse is telling us is that Yahweh did not consecrate this feast. Okay? It is a man-made doctrine. And at that time of the year, Yahweh did not tell you to abstain from the meats that He said you could eat. Verse 4. Because every creature of Elohim is good, and none is to be rejected if it is received with thanksgiving. Now that's where they love to stop. Because that last verse, if you don't read the next verse, makes it sound like everything is clean now and we can eat it. But having gone over the Torah portions, we do understand that there are certain things, certain creatures that are clean by Yahweh's word. And that's what the next verse tells us. So let's not stop there, and let's read through to the next verse and see exactly what this set of scripture means. And then we'll go back and do this word study. Verse 5. For it is set apart. Remember what we just read back here in the Torah. Okay? If you do not eat these things that I do not consider food, okay, you will be clean. But if you eat them, you are unclean. And if you are unclean, you are not set apart to me. And I'm commanding you to be set apart to me because you're my children. So I have sanctified certain things that you can consider food, meat. For it is set apart by the word of Elohim and prayer. So this is this prayer. Normally they would say, Baruch atah Yahweh Eloheinu. Blessed be Yahweh, King of the universe, for providing food and drink in the earth. Okay. That prayer. Okay. And the word of Elohim. So this verse, when you read it straight through and you read verse 5 as well, it tells you that there is a place in the word of Elohim that has sanctified certain things to be eaten and certain things not to be eaten. And we just went over it in Leviticus chapter 11. Now, let's go back up here to verse 3. Forbidding to marry, saying to abstain from foods. Okay, and a lot of you are going to see meats there, which Elohim created to be received with thanksgiving by those who believe and know the truth. Now we know that the Torah is the truth. Yahweh's word is the truth. So there's a place in Yahweh's word, right down here in verse 5. It is sanctified by the word of Elohim. And we already went over the verses where He sanctified these things as food. Okay, so let's look at verse 3, and most of you are seeing the word meat. We're going to look this up. I'm going to show you exactly. Last time we went over these verses, I didn't get into this word study, and so we're going to add to the last teaching I've done on these verses by doing a word study on what we see here, meat or food. Now, Get your pencil and paper ready. And there's Brad's board. We see 1 Timothy chapter 4, verse 3. Some of us are seeing the word meats. Some of us are seeing the word food. This word can be found in the Strong's Concordance in the Greek section, and it's number 1033. And it's the word broma in Greek. Broma. Okay? Get all this information down here. I'll give you a few seconds to get that down so you can use this in the future. Because we're fixing to be, once we start looking up these definitions that came from the manuscripts that we have in the Greek, it is always revealing to see what it actually meant, because we don't see it in the English. We see two different words there in most translations. Mine says food. Most of your translations will say meat. The word of Yahweh, I believe, says meat. And surely the King James and New King James, and probably the NIV. I'm not sure about that one. Hope you've all got that. We're going to come back and I'm going to show you the definition. Hallelujah. Okay, so remember what I was saying is that it's speaking about food or meat that was sanctified or set apart by the word of Elohim. Now, I know there's going to be a lot of you that are trained in churchanity and other teachings that come with you can eat anything type doctrine. And you're going to say, well, you know, how do we know that it's not talking about the word of Elohim as in it came through the apostles in the New Testament in the theology that they produced? Most of you are going to say, well, Peter said we can eat anything in the book of Acts, and we're going to go to that as well. Okay? But I am submitting and proposing to all of you that if we do just a simple Greek word study, it will show us what the definition of that food, what food it's talking about. So, like I was saying, and I've said this prior to this teaching, when we were going over these verses in the book of Romans, it came up, and I said the same thing about it then, but now I want to take it a little bit deeper and prove that it was talking about that which was written in the Torah. Okay, that which was considered food in the Torah spoken by Yahweh. We can prove it by doing a Greek word study of the word meat or food in 1 Timothy chapter 4, verse 3. Those of you who have your Strong's Concordance, if you've already been there, you already know and you see it ahead of time before I even read it. Now remember, in the Strong's Concordance, the literal definitions of the words being defined stop when you see this symbol. All of the words that are written prior to that symbol are literal definitions. The ones written after that are just words in translation that translators have chosen to use over the literal meanings for whatever reason they chose, which should never be done. If we are able to transliterate sound of letters to make the pronunciation of a name in Hebrew, we should do that when translating. And if we can carry over the same definition in English, Spanish, Hebrew, it doesn't matter, then we should use the literal definitions. And many times that is not the case in most English translations or any translation as far as that goes. Hallelujah. Okay. Having said that, this is where my glasses would come in handy. These are small letters. Amen. Okay. The Greek word broma, number 1023 or 1033 in the Strong's. Okay, its literal definition is the base from the base 977. That's how you trace back the roots of the meanings of these words. But in this case, we're just going to look at the literal definitions. Food is in italics. That's a literal definition, and that's what the scriptures that I teach from puts in there. Okay? But listen what it says. Food, literal or figurative, especially articles allowed or forbidden by the Jewish law. Hallelujah. This set of verses that was written by Shaul is pertaining to that which was written in the Jewish law, that which was considered food and that which was not considered food in Leviticus chapter 11. Now, I know there's a bunch of you out there that are going, this just can't be true. However, we cannot argue with what these men that wrote what we now know as the New Testament, their lifestyles. They were not eating swine, shellfish, or anything else. They were still adhering to these commandments. Okay? And what we're going to do is we're going to go back to, everybody turn to Acts chapter 10, and we're going to go over a set of verses that is used by almost every teacher in churchanity that I grew up under. And they use these verses, especially verses 9 through 15 in Acts chapter 10, to say that we can eat anything, everything's been cleansed. And they also say that it was a messenger or Yahweh himself that told Kepha or Peter that it was okay to do so. All right? However, once again, most of the teachers fail to teach you the rest of the chapter because it reveals the truth about what was being said. Peter or Kepha himself, later on in the chapter, tells you what he meant by what he said concerning the vision. Okay? We're going to read Acts chapter 10, verses 1 through 4, or 1 through 5 first. Now there was a certain man in Caesarea called Cornelius, a captain of what was called the Italian regiment, dedicated and fearing Elohim with all his household, doing many kind deeds to the people and praying to Elohim always. See this? He was a believer. He believed in the Mighty One of Israel, yet he wasn't from the land of Judea. Amen? So what we see here is that the Yahudim of the first century that had been circumcised and everything else, even though this man believed in Yahweh, he would have been considered unclean had he not been circumcised. But he was a devout man who really believed in Yahweh. Dedicated and fearing Elohim with all of his household. He had his household in subjection to the commandments of Yahweh, the Elohim of Israel. That's what that means. Doing many kind deeds. He was doing mitzvot. That means that he completed the deeds, the good deeds outlined in the works of the Torah. He let the Torah work through him, and it caused him to shed good deeds upon people, just as Yeshua did. Hallelujah. And praying to Elohim always. Verse 3. He clearly saw in a vision about the 9th hour, which is 3 p.m. our time, I believe. About the 9th hour of the day, a messenger of Elohim coming to him and saying to him, Cornelius. And looking intently at him and becoming afraid, he said, What is it, Master? And he said to him, Your prayers and your kind deeds have come up for a remembrance before Elohim. Yahweh recognizes those who worship him and have their household in subjection, and he chooses them to be to take part in his plan. See this? That's what we should strive to do. Notice he and his household were in subjection to Yahweh. That means they were following the commandments. Him and his household. And he had found favor in the eyes of the Elohim of Israel. Remembrance. His remembrance came up before the king. And so the king sent a messenger to him to show favor upon him. I have something for you to do for me. A servant. And this is what we strive to do, to be a servant. Help us, Master, to be obedient to your commandments. For we believe in your Son, Yeshua. Hallelujah. He's fixing to reveal something to Cornelius because Cornelius loved him. Verse 5, and now send men to Jaffa. Most of you are going to see Joppa there. And send for Shimon, who is called Kepha. Okay? Now, so here's what we have. This man who was in subjection to Yahweh, him and his household, had found favor in the sight of Yahweh. So Yahweh sends a messenger to him and tells him, go to one of my people. Okay, one of my chosen ones has something that I want to reveal to you. Okay? Go down to verse 9. We'll read straight through to verse 15. And on the next day, as they were on their way and approaching the city, Kepha, or Peter, went up on the housetop to pray about the 6th hour, which is about noon. And he became hungry and wished to eat, but while they were preparing, he fell into a trance. And he saw the heaven opened. That means he was receiving a vision. The heavens were opened to him, and he received a vision in this dream. Okay? And he saw the heaven open, and a certain vessel, like a great sheet, bound at the 4 corners, descending to him and let down to the earth, in which were all kinds of 4-footed beasts of the earth, and wild beasts, and creeping creatures. Now remember, we just read about these creeping creatures, everything that creepeth on the earth, okay, that which is to be eaten or considered food, and that which isn't, that is not. Hallelujah. And the birds of the heavens. Okay, in that same chapter, it tells you what fowl you can eat, what fish you can eat out of the rivers and the seas, and what animals, all living creatures, which is to be considered food, and which is not to be considered food. Verse 13, and a voice came to him, rise up, Kepha, slay and eat. But Kepha said, not at all, Master, because I have never eaten whatever is common or unclean. You see this? Yeshua had been crucified. His death, burial, and resurrection had happened years prior to this. Okay? They were still keeping the commandments. He said, nothing unclean has ever touched my lips. Nothing common or unclean. I've never eaten anything bought in the common market. I've never eaten anything that was unclean in your word. And now this is the verse that they love to use to say that Yahweh cleansed all meats and we can eat anything now. And the voice came to him again the second time, what Elohim has cleansed, you do not consider common. See that? They love to stop there and say, see, Yahweh cleansed all of these meats, all of these unclean animals that he's seen in the sheet. Actually, let me lay it out like this. This sheet had 4 corners, which meant that there was going to be something brought down that would cover the 4 corners of the earth. And that which would be carried in it was the unclean. It's speaking, this is a vision about what the good news would produce, the gospel. It would cleanse all of those who were unclean, and this gospel would cover the 4 corners of the earth. Okay? Now, this vision had nothing to do with the commandments of clean and unclean foods in Leviticus chapter 11. As a matter of fact, those verses or that subject is not brought up anywhere in this entire chapter. Context, context, context is where it's at. If you context and you continue to read, you'll see by the mouth of the one that received the vision what the vision meant. Because after this vision, he wakes and the men show up to Joppa where he is at, who had been sent and came forth from the household of Cornelius. Okay? Now let's jump over to verse 24 and we'll read down to verse 28. And the following day they entered into Caesarea. They showed up, they went into Caesarea. And Cornelius was waiting for them. Okay, let me back up. The men show up. They come in. Okay, a place is provided for them, and then they tell Kepha that they are to bring him back to Cornelius's household. And he agrees, and he goes. This is where we're picking up in verse 24. And the following day they entered into Caesarea. So they left Joppa and went into Caesarea. And Cornelius was waiting for them, having called together his relatives and close friends. See, something had been revealed to Cornelius, and Cornelius wanted to share it because this man that was coming, this man of Yahweh, this apostle, this emissary whom they had heard of, and whom Yahweh told Cornelius himself to send for, was coming to bring them the good news. He wanted to share this. And this should be our goal. To share the things that Yahweh has told us with everyone. Our friends and our family. So Cornelius calls these friends and family to his house and says, Yahweh is sending someone to show us something today. Please be here. And the following day they entered into Caesarea, and Cornelius was waiting for them, having called together his relatives and close friends. Verse 25. And it came to be that when Kepha entered, Cornelius met him and fell down at his feet and bowed before him. But Kepha raised him up, saying, Stand up. I myself am also a man. I'm just a man. And talking with him, he went in and found many who had come together. And he said to them, You know that a Yahudite, a Jew, a Jewish man, is not allowed to associate with or go to one of another race. Listen to what he says about the vision that he had. But Elohim has shown me by the vision, okay, that we just read about, that I should not call any man common or unclean. That vision had nothing to do, according to the man that had the vision in his dream, according to his own interpretation of the dream, it had nothing to do with clean and unclean meat, or that which was unclean and not considered food being made food now that Yeshua had came. Anybody who is teaching that, I'm sorry, you're a false teacher. That's not what it meant, even from the mouth of the one who had the vision. If you are contradicting the word of Yahweh and the word of his messenger who caught the vision himself, if you're saying that that vision meant something other than what the man who received it said it was for, okay, you are in error. It had nothing to do with unclean meats being made clean by Yeshua's death, burial, and resurrection. That is a false teaching. That's not what it meant. He was showing him that the sheet that I told you represents the gospel message that would cover the four corners of the earth, okay, would cleanse all of those who were unclean, not in covenant with the mighty one of Israel. That's what the vision was about. That's what Kepha says it was about. And that's the truth about what it was for. Can't make up our own rules. Don't stop at verse 15. Read on through the chapter. We must follow those commanded laws. I want to close this evening by reading verses 34 through 36. And opening his mouth, Kepha said, Truly I see that Elohim shows no partiality, but in every nation he who fears him and works righteousness is accepted by him. You see this? He who works the righteousness that I believe is righteousness, which he was a Jew, he was a Yahudim. Okay, righteousness to them is defined in the law and the prophets. And he was telling them that this dream that he had, this vision, had nothing to do with the meats. It had everything to do with the people being cleansed in the regathering of the children of Israel. But in every nation, he who fears him and works righteousness. Let's go back to the beginning of the chapter. Now there was a certain man in Caesarea called Cornelius, a captain of what is called the Italian regiment, dedicated and fearing Elohim with all of his household, doing many kind deeds to the people and praying to Elohim always. You see this? But in every nation, he, even Cornelius, who fears him and works righteousness is accepted by him. That's what the vision was about. If we work the righteous works and deeds found in the Torah, that righteousness, and we'll leave with that definition. I'll take you to divine righteousness in the Torah, is accepted by him. He sent the word to the children of Israel, bringing the good news, the gospel. That sheet, the four corners that we were just talking about of the earth. That's where the gospel is to travel. The true gospel. The one with the true names. The one that includes the law and the prophets. The one that has you being obedient and believing in the blood. That good news. Peace through Yeshua, Messiah. He is master of all. We'll close. I want to define what these men knew. He was a man that was in submission and dedicated and feared Yahweh. He was in submission to and feared Yahweh. To fear was to give reverence to him. To do his wishes. To do the works that Elohim tells us to work. Okay? Now, Kepha makes a statement here, but in every nation, he who fears him and works righteousness. Now we're going to define righteousness. What Kepha knew the definition of righteousness was, or any Yahudim in the first century knew what the definition of righteousness was because it was defined in the only word that they had, the law and the prophets. Let us turn to the book of Deuteronomy. I believe it's chapter 6. Yes. Deuteronomy chapter 6, verses 24 and 25. In the first century, after Yeshua had been crucified, after he had been resurrected, years after this, we see that in every nation, he who fears and works righteousness will be accepted by Yahweh. Okay? Here's the definition of righteousness that these men believed in. The definition that came from the only word that they possessed, the Tanakh, the law and the prophets. Here is the definition of the righteousness these men were speaking of. Deuteronomy chapter 6, verses 24 and 25. And Yahweh commanded us to do all these laws. To fear, see, he feared Elohim. Yahweh our Elohim, for our good always. That's where the good deeds are. To keep us alive, as it is today. And it is our righteousness for us when we guard to do all this command before Yahweh our Elohim as he has commanded us. Righteousness that Kepha was speaking about and that Cornelius was performing is the righteous deeds commanded in the law. And it shall be our righteousness when we guard to do all of his commands. The apostles did not do away with the food laws or any commandment of the Father. Hallelujah. So let us pray. Heavenly Father, we praise you. We thank you for your Torah. We thank you for the testimonies in the Brit Ha Dasha, Father. We thank you for being present with us tonight. We thank you for your word, for the guidance that it gives us. Help us, Father, to walk more like your Son each and every day. Thank you for your Sabbaths, for your feasts, for your commandments. Help us to see these things, Father, so that we can be set apart. Thank you, Father, for the sanctification that comes by your word and by the blood that was shed. We praise you, Father. I ask that you would bless the ears of the hearers, and that you would be exalted and pleased with that which was spoken tonight, Father. For it was spoken to bring edification to you and your kingdom and the body of Yeshua and your purpose, Father. And we pray this, Father, in the precious name of Yeshua HaMashiach. Amen. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed yourself. And until next week, Baruch Hashem.
There's a time in your life of decision to test all your faith and what life you must live in. To test all your strength in the time that is given. Live your life in greatness.